because, like, let's think about it. What do we owe the Democratic Party? Nothing. Nothing. We owe them nothing. We owe them what they have given us over the last couple of decades, which is nothing. Nothing. Ciao VISIEM, hi all. So I am going to talk a little bit about American politics today, which is my least favorite subject in the whole universe, even though I am a PhD candidate in political science. My specialty is American politics. I really screwed myself over with that one, but anyways, I want to talk about Bernie suspending his campaign. I want to talk about this election, US elections in general a little bit, about the fact that US is not a democracy, about the two-party system, which once again, not a democracy, about the ruling class, about socialism, or whatever we call that these days. And just like where I'm at, where is everyone at? I feel like this is like an emotional time when it shouldn't be. Like, lesson number one, don't ever, 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 ever get emotionally invested in an election. Ever, ever. I think I'm actually handling it pretty well because I genuinely wasn't emotionally invested. I mean, I did let myself get a little bit carried away, like a tiny bit, but I definitely wasn't emotionally invested. I personally do not believe in elections at all. In 2016, I basically had the same stance I do now. Very little has changed. So I really wasn't emotionally invested, although I will say that this is the first American US election in which I've been, how should I put it, in which I've most actively encouraged others to participate, in which I have actually felt like there is a glimmer, like a tiny sliver of hope of something potentially tiny bit happening that could affect my life or just the lives of marginalized people in some tiny little potential way in our lifetimes, you know, like, wow, that's the most we can ask of our governments. Anyways, and I just want to address that for at first before we move on, because I do not believe in elections at all, but I was supportive of Bernie Sanders. First of all, of course, because his policies are close to my political ideologies. His policies are basically what most other Western democracies, since I'm from Europe, already have in place. You know, it's like, that's why I'm always like, radical policies where? Bitch, where? Like, the shit he's saying is shit that Americans should have had long time ago. It's embarrassing that y'all don't. So it's like, honestly, like basic human rights, you know? But anyways, I was participating more and I was encouraging people to vote because, as I've mentioned previously, I think that like my role in general as a human being in my circle and amongst my people is to just move people to the left. And I think in this election we actually had a chance by pushing people to understand and get behind Bernie's platform was moving people left. Whereas typically, like if we think of someone as Hillary Clinton, what's the point? If I try to get people to vote for her, that's not moving people left. Honestly, I'd make the case that encouraging people to vote for Warren isn't pushing people left. She said that she's capitalist to her, but I'm not going to talk about Warren in this video because honestly, I don't need people sending curses on me if you're not like, it's okay, you'll get there. But yeah, so I think like Bernie was the one chance that we actually had someone that was progressive, that encouraging people to vote for him was moving people left on in many ways. But as I've said before, elections are ruling class spectacle. Elections do not oh my god, it's really windy in here. Oh my god, can y'all hear it? Anyways, elections do not have the ability to liberate people. They do not possess the capacity. They cannot They cannot give us the type of change that we need. They simply cannot. It's like all of these people who are like, you know, I'm gonna graduate college and I'm gonna start working for Monsanto or something, and I'm gonna create the change from within. Boy, you won't. You will not. Okay, this is not how it works. You know, once you are part of this establishment, part of this institution, you are limited in what you can do. And just like simply put, disagree with your mom. Elections cannot do that. Like, they cannot. Specifically elections in a settler colonial state like the US, where the entire government and all of the institutions that stem out of it are rooted in white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy and imperialism and genocide. It's not gonna happen. It cannot happen. Like, simply cannot happen. So what can elections do? A lot of people see elections, a lot of people on the left see elections as harm reduction, basically. I still have a, you know, little bit of a problem with that, but at most what they can do is basically like enhance or reduce the welfare state. You know, they have the ability to distribute a tiny bit more resources to people in need, or take them away, you know, like tax code. Those are things that elections can affect, like a lot of other little things. In terms of harm reduction, it's true. For example, you know, like in the 2016 election, you can think about it as harm reduction. Like, if we have Hillary Clinton, who's a horrible war criminal, terrible person, we potentially, less harm would be done. But I have a problem with this, and this is where I'm going to try to not get into too much in the lesser of two evils rhetoric, which I simply do not get behind. It's trash. Because harm reduction for whom? I mean, how are you going to say the people who got bombed during Obama administration, if Hillary had been, you know, president, the people who would have been bombed, the people who would have been murdered in all of the imperialist wars, the people who were in cages throughout these administrations, the people who were deported. And let me remind you all again, Obama deported more people than previous Republican presidents combined. Okay, so get his name out of your mouth. I don't want to hear his name ever. Yeah, so it's just like, I have a problem with the lesser of two evils harm reduction thing, especially now that we have Biden and people telling us to basically, like, people telling sexual assault and rape survivors to vote for someone who is a rapist, you know? So yeah, basically it's just like harm reduction for whom? There are most marginalized, poor, immigrants, black people, a lot of other like intersectional marginalized identities, and like people in poverty, people in other countries who simply, like, there is no harm reduction, okay? Like, we die regardless, like, regardless. Police brutality happens regardless. Poverty and prisons and all of that happens regardless. So I think even the lesser of two evil harm reduction stance is really like, okay, for some people perhaps, like, yeah, I do see how, especially for a lot of women, especially for a lot of like liberal, white, upper middle class women, when it comes to, I don't know, like reproductive rights and things like that, there is a difference, you know, and you can talk about harm reduction and lesser of two evils and so on. But once again, that doesn't even apply to all people. Like, elections generally cannot give us the change that we need, and they cause harm. Like, all marginalized and oppressed people, when we participate in an election, even if we vote for the progressive or left candidate, we are actively participating in our own oppression. I mean, that's just due to the structure of elections. So basically, my favorite quote in the whole world: master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, okay? It's just not gonna happen. Elections are not gonna give us what we need. But anyways, so we've gotten over that. Now let's talk a little bit about Bernie. So, Daddy Bernie. Honestly, like, there are still so many, I think, like, people maybe who follow me on social media have this wrong impression that, like, I love Bernie just because of how I speak about him, which is a strategy to get people to come to the left. But I have a lot of issues. I mean, he's not nowhere near as far left as I would like to see my presidential candidate, even though I don't want a president. But anyways, but let's talk about him. So first of all, Bernie Sanders is the most progressive, by far the most left according to the US standards candidate we've ever gotten. Like, his record is the most progressive, the most consistent. Like, his platform by far the most progressive, the most consistent, by far seeking to address things and issues at the root rather than just, like, for example, honestly, like universal basic income is a good example of that, because although it sounds great in theory, it's used a lot as just a tool to, okay, we give this, but then we slash social services. So in the end, you're not getting nothing, you're actually getting less. But anyways, topic for another day. But yeah, so honestly, in my heart, in my soul, in my rational mind, I don't understand why we even ever needed a debate of any kind. I mean, he was giving people on a platter everything that like we've been wanting and asking, not everything, but basically what I mean is that I don't understand why there was a debate, because there's such a huge gap between him and the other candidates that like, why? Like at some point I'm just like, I don't understand why we're asking him to prove this and to prove that and to prove that when he's so clearly more progressive than like Biden. Like, are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding me? But more importantly, what I wanted to say about him, what I mentioned previously, is that he's not even that much left. Like, he's not even that much of a socialist, which is why for me it's just wild. Like, and honestly, like, think about it. If the establishment was this much against him and was willing to like pull out all their weapons to make sure that he does not become president, when at most he was posing like the tiniest bit of threat to the US capitalism, to the US capitalist system and so on, what type of system do we live in? Like, what would they do to an actual socialist candidate, to an actual, like, as far left as I'd like for a person to be? That is what honestly sometimes really discourages me, because it's just like, damn, we couldn't even get that. Like, we couldn't even get that. So really quickly, I also wanted to mention 2 other discourses I will not be engaging in. First of all, I really need to like try to stay positive, because I think like we're all really angry and upset and it's just not productive, and I'm really trying to like not be that way about this. But one discourse I don't understand why people are still fucking saying, it's about like, we need to beat Trump at all costs, like by any means necessary, we need to beat Trump. Bruh, oh my god, like I literally cannot. I mean, that is clearly said by people who had their awakening or understanding of like, literally, did you all get a good night's rest? Like, was sleeping for the past 20-30 years of your life great? Like, did you have nice sweet dreams? Because you must have just woken up in 2016. Like, to say that Trump is the problem in any way, to say that he's what we need to beat or whatever, boy, you're helping him by like spreading this fucking nonsense and feeding liberals the shit which they eat up. Like, honestly, like, come on, this is like a settler colonial state, like, that's built on these systems of oppression. I feel like I'm a broken record, but honestly, like, you just gotta keep saying it. Like, these are systemic issues that have always been here. Like, people have always been dying and been killed by the state, and there's, like, capitalism has been destroying and exploiting all of us here, and racism and so on throughout all these presidencies. Okay, it's not him. And also, like, this thing is so dangerous, because this is how we level down. By saying that, instead of like getting more progressive candidates, we get less and less progressive candidates. Like, this is why getting behind Hillary was like, the fuck is the point? Like, this bitch is horrible. And it's the same now with like getting Biden. Like, and this also bleeds into the other narrative, that's the vote blue no matter who. Okay, that is literally for like privileged rich white people who don't actually get affected by, who don't care, basically. Because like, let's think about it. What do we owe the Democratic Party? Nothing. We owe them nothing. We owe them what they have given us over the last couple of decades, which is nothing. The Democratic Party is a dead party, a failed party. They have given us nothing. Okay, so it's like, we're not engaging in that, not engaging in vote blue no matter who. That's what's gotten all these, that's just not a strategy for us to get better candidates, period. Anyways, I feel like I'm ranting, but to sum up, elections are a ruling class spectacle. Elections do not possess the ability to give us the type of change that we need. US is not a democracy. US is a failed state. Do elections matter? Yes. Asterisk here, terms and conditions apply. Honestly, do elections matter between a Trump and a Bernie? Yes, they matter. Do elections matter between a Trump and a Biden? I will not be saying yes. Somebody else can go say it. I honestly, like, in my position, in my socioeconomic position, and so on, and like other layers of my identity, I will not be saying that. I genuinely don't believe in asking people to actively participate in their own oppression, to actively vote for their own oppressor, which to some extent is what all US elections are, but there's degrees to this. Voting for Biden, I will not be asking anyone to do that. So what does work? Okay, I do not want people to be discouraged, although I feel like a lot of us are, but honestly, elections is never gonna be it. Like, so it's okay. I'm not upset. Like, elections do not work, but that's fine because other things work. Protests work, strikes work, boycotts work, you know, community works, direct action works, local and communal and national organizing works. I think, like, if you're sitting right now and thinking, like, what now? Like, this fucking sucks, like, this blows, like, what do we do now? Get involved. Like, things are happening, and things that are happening at the community level are always more powerful. They actually do possess the ability to create change. Anything good we've ever gotten from the state, from the ruling class in the history of time has been because of series of direct action, of protests, of strikes, of boycotts, and so on. Not because we went to the election polls and like clicked a button or something. Okay, the rich will never let us vote away their wealth. Like, that's just not. So it's okay, because there are other things that work and things that we can do and things that are constantly being done by organizers on the ground. Like, God bless all of them. You know what else works? Violence works, okay? I'm not gonna be commenting or taking further questions on this, but violence works. And if you go far enough left, you get your guns back. I'm just gonna say that. A side note I wanted to say about this whole election, as y'all know, I'm not a citizen. I cannot vote. I do live in the US, but even if I didn't live in the US, the sad and unfair thing is that all of us need to follow this election, okay? The American election, the freaking imperial core, affects the entire world when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to climate change. It sucks, and it's so unfair that this election and what happens here is going to affect like the rural jungles of like the Amazon where people don't even have Wi-Fi, okay? But it will affect them directly, and that's what's unfair. That is why it's just so frustrating that we all need to be invested to some extent in this election, although like already after 2016 I was like, I just want to opt out. Like, I don't have the mental strength to handle another election. And just to tie this together also with COVID-19, coronavirus, and just general wealth inequality, socioeconomic inequality in this country, which is just insane. I think more and more these things are happening, and this election and so on, that's really exposing to more and more like larger and larger segments of the population that just how bad US capitalism is, just how unjust and unfair and brutal and bloody it is. I mean, when you're asked to sacrifice your grandparents for the stock market, when you're asked to die so that some dude can keep his stock prices up, okay, like I think some people are, you know, noticing things. I remain a little bit skeptical because honestly, how should I put this? I personally feel like, and this is because I come from a country with radically different welfare state, sense of human rights and so on, I personally feel like just living in the US in the conditions that people live here right now should enrage you enough on any given day to be ready to go out in the streets. Like, I often like wonder, would I be feeling the same way if I was born and raised here, if I didn't know different? I don't know, but I just want y'all to know from someone coming from a freaking former Soviet Union country that's small and poor AF, this is not normal. The way people live here, the exploitation, the work, the conditions of the working classes, just the violence of poverty, the lack of access to basic human rights and resources such as healthcare, the debt, student debt, like all of those things, that is not normal, okay? That is not, like, that in itself, regardless of any election, regardless of a Trump or a Biden or a Bernie or a whoever, that in itself should enrage you enough to just be like, nah, like this is not okay. US capitalism is a death cult. Like, it will literally lead us all straight into death for profit for someone else. I do hope that more people are really opening their eyes and seeing what's happening. And I think, like, once again, if we, take this election, take this pandemic and so on, and let this radicalize you, okay? Read some Marx. I can't believe I'm saying that. Ew, I really don't want to become like one of my department people, but do read. Like, read him, or read the comic book version of him, or read literally like anything about socialism, about capitalism, about neoliberalism, about late-stage capitalism, about the exploitation of working classes, about settler colonial states, about, like racism and patriarchy and all of these things in the context of US, the empire that is the US, and really, and let this come with a small disclaimer that I actually don't think most working classes and most people living in conditions in race and class subjugated communities need that reading, because we know this from experience, because we live it, baby. We know it by experience. So that's just I need to give that disclaimer when I tell people to read, because not all of us really need that reading in order to understand these things, or it's not our primary way of learning about these things. But let that reading change and affect every single aspect of your life, how you live it, how you consume it, and what you do. And I think, like, yes, a lot of us are down. A lot of us feel like, oh, like this sucks, like despair, basically, which is rational and normal and so on. But, and another thing, I think, like, people always say to me or behind my back that my ideas, my political beliefs and so on are just too radical, they're too idealistic, they're never gonna happen. Honestly, like, we need to act that, like, we need to believe and act as if the impossible was possible, because if the possible assures that people are going to be dying en masse, that's not okay? You can't tell some people, I'm sorry, you're just gonna have to die, because, like, no, absolutely not. We should not, that should not be the strategy. Revolution is possible. It is possible, and it's going to happen. And we should never just settle for certain people, settle in a way that assures that certain people are always going to be dying and suffering and living in just suffering your whole life. That's not okay. That's not acceptable. And yes, absolutely, things that felt like they were never going to change, like the divine rule of kings and monarchy and so on, and a lot of millions other things, like, I don't know, slavery and a lot of, like, other occupied states and a lot of wars and things like that, things that we felt like were never going to be different. It's never going to change. It's just, it's just the way things are. And to dream any other way is to just be too idealistic and radical. And those things changed, okay? Everything is possible. US hasn't even been around for that long, okay? This state hasn't even been around for that long. Same, like, I think a good example when we talk about this is ICE, like Immigration Customs Enforcement Agency. They've been around for like 10 years, and people now, when we discuss them and we discuss ICE raids and all the problems with immigration, act like, well, of course they have to. We have the more progressive politicians voting for funding for them, because it's like, well, they have to exist, it has to be some type of, like immigration fascist police. No, there absolutely does not have to be that. In fact, they haven't even existed for more than like 10-15 years. Okay, so just get that thinking out of your head. That's the way they want you to think. Radical, I keep coming back to this in my life and my research and so on. Radical imagination, it's what's missing most. And I think like political imagination in particular, radical political imagination, we cannot keep thinking in the bounds of these institutions the way that they want us to keep thinking. We need to break out of that. You need to break out of that. That's the only way to liberate ourselves and the people. I hope that the takeaway from this is that let this radicalize you. It's okay. It's just an election. It was never going to give us everything that we need. It's okay to be sad, but you know, we move. Like, we keep going. There's people that are still in cages. There's people that are in prisons. There's people that are in poverty. There's people affected by US drone strikes and all of that stuff daily. There's people that need our help and our work and our organizing daily. So we keep going. Like, we don't stop. Anyways, that's it from me. My tongue is always green when I'm drinking mate, and that's when I do my videos, so y'all just gonna think my tongue is always green. But anyways, that's it from me. I hope that this moment radicalizes you. I hope that you understand that although we were and we had to be invested in this election is not the end all be all, not at all. There are other things that we can still be doing, things that we should be doing, and things that actually have the chance to give us the change we need and deserve. And yep, that's it from me. I love you all so much, and let's get to work, okay? Let's smash this white supremacist capitalist patriarchy and this terrible imperialist war machine state. We got this, okay? We got this. Love you.